RTX 5090 laptop GPU, thinner than ever, finally using an AMD processor, and great for your wallet.
Wait,
This is Razer's Blade 16 we're reviewing. Well, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. As always, Razer's Blade 16 features their signature CNC aluminum chassis with anodized matte black finish. This just makes the Blade feel more premium compared to all other gaming laptops out there. It's the closest a Windows gaming laptop comes to the solid build of Apple's MacBook, so overall build quality feels great. Keyboard flex is minor compared to most other laptops, but there was a little more lid flex compared to last year's Blade. I suspect they're using less metal as it's lighter. But it doesn't really matter, as the screen hardly moves when typing. The hinges feel smooth and sturdy, even when ripping the lid open way too hard. There's a small indent on the front for getting your finger in to make opening easier, and the screen goes back 135 degrees. Standard stuff. Razer says this year's Blade is 30% smaller compared to last gen, coming in at just 14.9mm at its thinnest point. For comparison, last year's Blade 16 was almost 47% thicker when comparing the thinnest points. The difference feels noticeable when holding both laptops. The laptop itself weighs in at 4.6 pounds or 2.1 kilos, increasing to 6.4 pounds or 2.9 kilos with a 280-watt charger included. This makes it one of the lightest 16-inch gaming laptops we've ever tested. It's beaten by the Asus Zephyrus G16, which has also been refreshed with up to RTX 5090 graphics this year. Get subscribed for our review. Meanwhile, last year's Blade was 15% heavier than the 2025 model. Things are similar with the charger included. There's a nice weight reduction compared to the last gen Blade design, but Asus's G16 is certainly looking a fair bit more portable. The new 280-watt charger is actually slightly bigger physically compared to last year's 330-watt charger. They also stopped braiding the cable this year, so it doesn't feel as fancy. My configuration has AMD's 12-core Zen 5 processor, Nvidia's RTX 5090 graphics, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 16-inch QHD+ 240Hz OLED screen. But this is one of the top-spec versions. It's available with lower specs for less money when you customize it with the link below the video. The keyboard gets a nice upgrade this year. It's got 1.5mm of key travel, which Razer says is 50% more than before. So basically, the keys just feel nicer and deeper to press when typing. It's still not my favorite laptop to type on, but it is better now. It's still got some of the nicest looking per key RGB lighting. All keys and secondary functions get lit up, but it's got dual lighting now. So if you hold the shift or function keys, a secondary light shows you which keys can be interacted with. The keyboard still has way too many brightness levels with the F10 and F11 shortcuts. We measured 17 at 6% brightness increments, which is just too many for a keyboard shortcut. You can control it down to 1% increments in software, which is great if still excessive. But for keyboard shortcuts, less is more, so you don't have to spam the buttons to change it. Otherwise, there are 11 different lighting effects available through Razer's Synapse software, with more customization available in the Chroma software. You can also control how keyboard and lid lighting behaves depending on whether the charger is connected or not. There are 5 extra programmable macro keys on the far right side now. They didn't get in my way, but my partner said they made her miss the enter key a few times because she expects it to be on the edge. But then it's M3 instead, so it might take some getting used to. The power button is still close to delete and backspace, but a short accidental press doesn't do anything. You have to hold it for a little longer for it to put the laptop to sleep. An action you can also change or stop in Windows anyway. The glass touchpad isn't quite as large as last gen, but it still feels massive. It's super smooth, clicks anywhere, and generally works well, but I had a problem with palm rejection. Sometimes when trying to click, my palm might be barely touching the bottom corner of the touchpad, causing undesirable results. But at the same time, I couldn't force it to happen on camera. It just kind of happened sometimes and was annoying. The Blade 16 has 6 speakers now, up from 4 last gen. This includes 2 front-facing ones, with the rest underneath. There's a bit more bass, and they sound a little clearer compared to last gen. The Latencymon results weren't ideal, but not completely terrible either. The port layout is very similar to last gen. From the back, the left side has the power input, two USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports, a USB 4 Type C port, and a 3.5mm audio combo jack. The right side has a UHS-2 SD card reader. A little further to the back this generation, there's a USB 4 Type-C and USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A port on this side too, followed by HDMI 2.1 output and Kensington lock. I like that there's Type A and Type-C ports on both sides of the laptop, and either Type-C port can be used to charge the laptop with up to 100 watts, as long as you use a 20-volt charger. Both Type-C ports also have DisplayPort 1.4 support for connecting a monitor, but by default, they both connect via the AMD integrated graphics, before getting to the Nvidia graphics. So there'll be a slight performance hit when running games over Type-C, unless you force both Type-C ports to instead connect directly to the Nvidia discrete graphics through the BIOS. HDMI always connects directly to the Nvidia graphics, and we confirmed it could run our LG B9 TV at 4K 120Hz 12-bit with G-Sync. Getting inside requires taking out 10 small TR5 screws, all the same length. I didn't need any tools to pry the bottom panel off, but my kit does have the TR5 screw bit, so I'll leave a link below if you're after good laptop opening tools. Inside we've got the battery down the front, installed PCIe Gen 4 M.2 SSD above on the right, a secondary spare M.2 slot to the left of that, and the Wi-Fi 7 card on the far right. I confirmed both M.2 storage slots could fit my 4TB drive with chips on both sides no problem. This is an upgrade over last gen, which had the two M.2 slots stacked on top of each other, only allowing thinner drives. The speeds from the installed 2TB PCIe Gen 4 M.2 drive are great, and that goes for the SD card slot too. Some good stuff here. The card sticks out a little, so be careful not to bump it. Wi-Fi speed was decent, basically matching ASUS's smaller flow Z13 with the same MediaTek card. Last year's Blade performed better here with its Intel Wi-Fi card, but at the end of the day, this is still like 2 gigabit, probably plenty for most of you. Alright, we need to talk about the RAM situation. Unfortunately, memory cannot be upgraded as it's on board with the CPU, but that just seems to be the case for most laptops with AMD's Ryzen AI9 HX370 processor. It's not just some evil ploy by Razer. On the one hand, yeah, it kinda sucks that you can't upgrade the memory, but on the other hand, this allows for faster LPDDR5X 8000 speeds, while most other gaming laptops max out at DDR5 6400 or 5600. Plus the Blade is available with up to 64 gigs of memory, which will likely be plenty for a lot of you. In the US, even the base model comes with a minimum of 32 gigs of RAM. See you later 16 gigs. Of course it's not cheap, but that's really good to have as the entry level given you can't upgrade later. The lack of upgradable memory is the reason why the upgrade score isn't as good as previous versions. Even Razer's smaller Blade 14 is better in that regard. But it's worth pointing out that thinner laptops I'd consider to be competition, like ASUS's Zephyrus G16, use the same processor, and are also limited to no RAM upgrades. This year's new 2025 Blade 16 is powered by a 90Wh battery, which is a little smaller compared to the 95Wh battery found in the bigger last-gen version. The battery refresh rate option is enabled by default, which automatically lowers the screen's refresh rate to 60Hz when you unplug the charger to save power, and it goes back to 240Hz when you plug back in. You can also use the Function plus R shortcut to manually swap between these refresh rates at any time. You can enable the battery health optimizer through the Synapse software to limit the maximum charge level of the battery between 50 and 80%, which helps improve the longevity of the battery. Battery life is an area where Nvidia claims to have made some big improvements this generation, and there's a 22% runtime improvement compared to gaming on last year's Blade, despite last gen having a bigger battery, though it's hard to say how much of this difference is purely due to the GPU. The YouTube video playback test lasted a bit longer too, but that one runs on the integrated graphics instead, and generally AMD processors are more power efficient than Intel in that test. I'll also note that I didn't notice any major battery drain during testing despite the charger being 50 watts lower compared to last gen. Maybe a 1 to 2% loss after testing Cyberpunk for an hour. These new RTX 50 gaming laptops have an updated battery boost feature to improve the gaming experience when running on battery power. Basically, instead of the FPS being locked at say 30, it'll run higher at 60 FPS while you're actively there playing a game. But then if you stop for a bit and take a drink or have a snack or open something less demanding like a minimap or quest menu, the FPS will dip back down to 30 to help save battery. We haven't tested that here, as we're still trying to work out the best way to test that in a reproducible and fairly comparable manner. But that is something new this generation. Let's check out thermals next. We've still got two fans with the CPU and GPU covered by a vapor chamber cooler. There's this thermal hood area towards the back of the bottom panel, which is a bit thicker to allow for more cooling space. There are holes in the bottom panel above the fans for intake, and air only gets exhausted down and out the back, so no hot air blowing on your mouse hand. Razer's Synapse software allows us to change between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are silent, balanced, performance, and custom. The new M4 shortcut key next to the right shift key can also be used to swap between them. You can swap between auto fan speed, fixed fan speed, or manual fan curves in silent, balanced, and performance modes. For some reason, you can't customize the fans in custom mode, despite it being called, well, custom. Custom mode also lets us set different CPU and GPU power levels, but if you set the GPU to high, the CPU maxes out at medium, and vice versa. We can also manually control the CPU power limit between 45 and 95 watts. And there's also an option for CPU undervolting, which can be used in any of the 4 performance modes, but enabling it grays out the CPU power control. The internal temperatures were cool at idle. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst-case full-load scenario. Even in the worst case, none of these temperatures are what I would classify as hot. All internal temperatures were comfortably below 80 degrees Celsius with this workload. There wasn't a noticeable difference by closing the lid, so no problem if you want to dock the laptop. Setting the fans to maximum lowered the temps a bit compared to auto fans, but as you'll hear soon, they're louder too. I'm swapping to the IETS GT600 cooling pad in 2025 onwards to better represent modern coolers compared to my older thermal take. Higher fan RPM results in lower temps, but the fan noise also gets fairly loud at 1400 RPM and above. Undervolting the CPU resulted in slightly lower temperatures without negatively affecting the performance, as seen in the clock speeds for the same tests. The CPU is pretty much locked in at 2.6 GHz across all 12 cores no matter what. It only increases to just below 3 GHz if we use custom mode to set the CPU to high. Of course, the compromise is the GPU gets limited to medium, which is why its clock speed is now lower than most of the other results. We can see this limits the GPU to around 129 watts, down from the 145 watts or so that performance and custom modes are otherwise able to sustain. If whatever you're doing needs more CPU power than GPU power, custom mode can help you out. The Nvidia control panel says the RTX 5090 in the Blade 16 can run up to 175 watts with dynamic boost, but with the CPU also loaded up at the same time, we saw around 145 watts best case. So not full power, but also not bad considering the thinner size of the laptop. Here's how the Blade 16 performs in an actual game with the different performance modes. I've got the native results without upscaling shown in purple, and a demonstration of the performance improvement that's possible by setting DLSS 4 to balanced in red. Like we saw in the thermal tests, in this workload, it doesn't seem like it's worth messing around with custom mode, as there's not a whole lot of difference to frame rates. So it's no surprise that the CPU undervolt didn't make a performance difference in this particular game. We're GPU bound at the native 2560 by 1600 resolution. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload, like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle. There's basically no difference in single-core performance in any of the modes we tested, and multi-core scores start seeing less gains with more power applied once we're already in performance mode. Undervolting the CPU by the maximum amount allowed in Synapse gave us almost the same performance, but the CPU was running with 6 watts less power, which should mean it's running a bit cooler too. This is the best result we've had from AMD's Ryzen AI9 HX370 processor so far, both in single and multi-core performance. Granted, it is also the heaviest of these laptops too, so probably more cooling capacity capacity to. It's only clearly beaten by laptops with more cores and threads, whether those be Intel or AMD based. And this includes last year's Blade, which had more raw CPU power. Performance lowers if we unplug the charger and instead run off of battery power, as it's limited to balanced mode. There's quite a big dip in single-core performance, which isn't something we usually see from laptops with this or most other AMD processors. But multi-core performance is still higher. Most laptops I test are in the low 30 degrees Celsius range on the keyboard at idle, and the Blade was higher in the mid-30s in the center, so just a little warm to the touch. It gets warmer with the stress test running, with the middle now in the mid-40s, so still warm but not hot. Balanced mode was pretty similar. The left and right sides are very cool as air comes in through the keyboard. Performance mode was similar, with the middle of the keyboard in the mid-40s. It's warm but not uncomfortable, and the WASD area is very cool. The keyboard temps are notably cooler in the center with the fans maxed out. The back is still hot where air exhausts, but you don't need to touch there. The hottest point of the keyboard was definitely warmer compared to the last gen Blade, but not only was the last gen Blade a bigger laptop, its fans were louder when running this test too. So that's the compromise. Here's how the fans sound. The fans were silent when doing nothing at idle. They get louder with the stress test running, with volume increasing in the higher modes as expected. Maxing them out is fairly loud, but it's nowhere near as crazy as running the cooling pad at higher RPM. It's definitely possible to get the temps even lower, as we've seen. It just depends on your tolerance to louder fans. But if you do prefer lower fan noise, lower setting presets can still get decent frame rates in games. Alright, let's talk about the OLED display. On paper, it's got the same specs as the last gen Blade 16, but the panel model is slightly different. And Delta E out of the box was great, as it comes calibrated from the factory. Brightness is decent, getting to around 400 nits at full brightness, with a little brighter possible with HDR enabled. This puts it in line with most other OLED panels that we've measured, and within the margin of error range to the panel in last year's Blade 16. In most cases, you've got to go for mini LED if you want significantly brighter, which was available last gen. Backlight bleed does not exist, as black results in pixels being turned off. The glossy panel looks nice, but reflections will get annoying if you're using the laptop in a bright environment. And like other OLED panels, PWM is used to adjust brightness, which may be annoying for some. Plus, there's always the possibility of OLED burn-in over time, though I haven't really heard of that happening in laptops, considering they've been available for years now. Average gray-to-gray screen response time was excellent, at less than half a millisecond, so it's super quick, just like other OLED panels that we've tested. They're all significantly faster compared to any other panel technology out there, and ideal for competitive players. The total system latency is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire appears on the screen in Counter-Strike 2. It's one of the fastest results compared to many other laptops, and only beaten by liquid cooling of 4090, so that's promising for these new RTX 50 laptops. The Blade 16 has advanced Optimus, so you can swap between Optimus on or off without rebooting. Having advanced Optimus means it must have a muck switch, but the traditional muck switch option isn't available through software, so if you need that for some reason, like changing the GPU the Type-C ports connect to, you'll have to go to the BIOS. G-Sync is only available when Optimus is off, but FreeSync is available from the integrated graphics when Optimus is on. There's a 1080p camera above the screen, just like last gen, and it still has IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock. Here's how the camera and microphones look and sound on the new Razer Blade 16, and this is what it sounds like while typing on the keyboard. Now for what you've all been waiting for. Let's see how the RTX 5090 graphics in Razer's Blade 16 compares in games. Cyberpunk 2077 was tested with our own custom test run, and I've got the Blade 16 shown by the red highlight. It's looking good for the RTX 5090 if we start out with the highest resolution we test, 4K. Sure, it's only 4 FPS ahead of the best 4090 result from last gen, but if we actually compare it to Razer's last gen Blade 16, which was a bigger laptop, we're seeing a 13% FPS improvement. The 5090 in the Blade wasn't able to maintain its chart-topping result at 14 1440p. It's still 10% faster compared to the last gen blade with 4090, and to be fair, all the 4090s beating it are in bigger and thicker laptops. But still, I was kind of hoping for more. CPU performance matters more at lower resolutions like 1080p, with the 5090 only using about 94 watts of power in this test as it's CPU limited, down from 129 watts at 1440p and 150 watts at 4K. This puts it at about the same performance as the Blade 16 from 2 years ago, so not much progress if your goal is lower resolutions like this. Control is a GPU-heavy game, yet we didn't see it top the charts at 4K like we did in Cyberpunk. Yeah, the dips in performance, as measured by the 1% lows, are better compared to last gen, but the average FPS from the 5090 isn't really any different to those 4090 results. It's a very similar deal at 1440p, which isn't surprising, as 4K should be more GPU bound. If the 5090 was going to give us better performance, we'd have already seen it. And yet again, same deal at 1080p. The average FPS is much the same as last gen, though it may be the newer Zen 5 processor significantly assisting with less dips in performance. Honestly, the performance in our usual review games wasn't that impressive, so I've also tested some newer games with ray tracing and upscaling on the Blade 16 with RTX 5090 laptop graphics, and the one from a couple of years ago with 4090 laptop graphics. There's less than a 9% increase to average FPS at 1440p and 4K resolutions in Alan Wake 2, but the 1% lows are 40% higher with the 5090 laptop, which translates to a more stable, smoother gaming experience. Hard to say how much of that is CPU change, GPU change, or faster memory. But on the other hand, Cyberpunk 2077 with the ray tracing ultra preset was basically the same at 1440p, and then only 3 FPS or 6% faster at 4K. The 5090 laptop was actually worse at 1080p, presumably as the low resolution takes advantage of the extra CPU power in the older Intel-based blade. Of course, we could juice up those FPS numbers on the RTX 5090 by using Nvidia's new DLSS multi-frame generation feature, which does work alright as long as you've got a high enough base frame rate. But I don't think that's a fair comparison unless also comparing visual quality, which could be its own massive video. I also need to note that I couldn't test our usual Red Dead Redemption 2 on this laptop, because it kept crashing in the same part of the test every single time, and this was a problem that Nvidia was able to replicate, so presumably it will be fixed at some point. We also had a few crashes in Control, but it was nowhere near as consistent, and that game did recently get its first major update in almost 4 years, so the instability may not be specific to the 50 series. We'll need more time on that one. Anyway, the 5090 was only really able to beat the 4090 at higher resolutions, but ultimately, the differences weren't really that big. Now, this is a thinner laptop. Last year's thicker Blade 16 with 4090 graphics was one of the lowest performing 4090 laptops we tested all year, and that was a bigger design than this one. So I'm very interested to see how well the 5090 can do in bigger laptops. Basically, I'm trying to reserve judgment on the laptop 5090 GPU until we get it in a few more machines. And I've got plenty of big 20 plus game comparisons between the 5090, 5080, 5070 Ti, and 5070 against each other, 40 series, and desktop graphics cards. So make sure that you're subscribed for all that upcoming content. These are the highest 3D Mark results I've ever measured from any gaming laptop in the Steel Nomad, Port Royal, TimeSpy graphics, and Firestrike graphics tests. So it definitely looks like the 5090 laptop GPU can do better in GPU-heavy synthetic workloads like these, even when it's in a thinner laptop like the Blade. As for content creation, performance is okay, but also we can't really properly test the 50 series yet until newer versions of Premiere and Resolve are out of beta to take advantage of the new 422 10-bit hardware acceleration and extra encoders and decoders. The BIOS still looks like it's old enough to drink, but it's functional, though there's not a whole lot of extra things to do in here that aren't also available in software. Linux support was tested with an Ubuntu 24.10 live CD. By default, the keyboard, touchpad, Wi-Fi, speakers, and camera all work. Keyboard shortcuts for adjusting volume, keyboard lighting brightness, and screen brightness all worked too. A great result for new hardware. Pricing and availability will change over time, so check the link below the video for updates and current sales. And if the Blade 16 does have a good sale, we'll add it to the gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that every day to include all of the latest sales. So make sure that you check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. At the time of recording in late March, the Blade 16 starts at $3,000 for RTX 5070 Ti graphics, and it's a $500 extra to upgrade to the RTX 5080 graphics. I haven't had chance to compare the 5070 Ti and 5080 laptop GPUs just yet, but I will compare them in 20 plus games as soon as I can. So again, make sure you're subscribed. The RTX 5090 version of the Blade 16 that we've looked at in this video costs $1,000 more than the 5080 version, but it also bumps up the processor and doubles the SSD space. We're talking about $4,500 for the configuration we're looking at here. Of course, Razer gaming laptops have always been expensive. When I reviewed last year's 4090 model a year ago, it was $300 less for the RTX 4090, and that had the same amount of RAM and SSD capacity. So ultimately, the question becomes, is this year's newer model worth $300 more for the thinner design? AMD processor, faster but soldered RAM, better speakers, better keyboard, better battery life, and RTX 5090 graphics. I mean, not that I'm looking to spend such a crazy amount of money on a gaming laptop, but if I was that sort of customer already looking to spend $4,000, then yeah, I think it makes sense to spend the extra $300 to get all those improvements. Of course, that doesn't factor in sales that are likely to happen on the last gen Blade 16, which are more likely to happen now that this is out. I do think that the Blade 16 itself is a much better gaming laptop this year, except at the end of the day, I didn't find a whole lot of major performance improvements with the new RTX 5090 graphics over the older 4090. I'm a bit disappointed in the performance uplift in games, if I'm being honest. At least when not factoring in frame generation, of course. I suppose that's to be expected, as this year's Blade 16 is thinner too. I guess we can't have everything. But still, the crazy high prices make it very difficult to justify unless you have a ton of money to spend, and you want one of the best feeling gaming laptops. Razer laptops have always been expensive, that's nothing new. And the prices I'm showing in this video are early pre-order prices before any sales, so you'll have to check for updates with those links below. Again, this is the first RTX 50 gaming laptop we've reviewed. We're going to cover plenty more this year, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of that content. Until then, you can find out about another new gaming laptop coming out this year over in this video next, where I go through all the changes Lenovo's Legion Pro 7i has this year compared to last year. So I'll see you over in that one.